Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
A blessed good afternoon to each and every one. I know a week away from what will be the Easter weekend, so let's enjoy and give thanks. I'm honored today that our first discussion to have a chance to talk to some of the wonderful people on the BRAC, the Celebrity Showcase, and we have the excellent company join us by phone. Miss Lynn Walton, 1 p.m. Stephanie Dos Santos will be our guest, and we're going to focus on relationships. You see what it's all about? So stay tuned for Talk Today.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. MedLab in Smith Road Plaza, your complete medical laboratory solution. Call 949-7331. And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village, convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255. Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. And too many times we fail to appreciate, and when we do, to acknowledge, and when we do, to celebrate the wonderful people that are in our society, whether they're born into the soil and then trace their ancestral roots back generations, or whether they've married into our people, or whether they come to reside. It's a blessing. I've been honored already for this day to sit in the company of such a wonderful person, and now to even continue in that blessing as we join via the phone from the beautiful BRAC as we welcome Miss Lynn Walton. Hey, good afternoon, Mom. How are you today?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you.
Well, thank you for accepting our invitation to share, as long as you can, not just to reminisce and to remind us of the stories of past, but the contributions, the service and the sacrifice, and perhaps to call within our minds, especially within the younger generation, what it must have been like, for our parents and their parents, and to appreciate that where we are and what we have is because of them. So thanks very much. Would it be okay initially to ask of you, so that the listening public get a better appreciation? Tell us a little bit, if you can, about yourself, just briefly, so maybe your experience working, and to share about your wonderful husband a bit, and as we talk about the book and the stories that he related to you. Would that be okay?
Sure. Mm-hmm. My name is Lynn Walton, and ultimately, I think you wanted me to talk about the book I wrote.
Yes, Mom.
Called The Adventures and Misadventures, Boy from Booby Point. It's stories. It's about my husband, George Walton, and his childhood. He grew up in Booby Point, Cayman BRAC. Booby Point is the very last district at the northeast end of Cayman BRAC. And I chose to write the book because I grew up in a city environment. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, which is totally different from that of Booby. Okay? And we've been married for 52 years. And over that time, we have shared and compared stories of our youth and growing up. Mm-hmm. And I was very fascinated by the freedoms that George experienced as a child. Mm-hmm. It was quite the opposite of my comparatively cloistered childhood experiences. I was also captivated by the total family and community involvement in the rearing of children in Booby Point at that time. Mm-hmm. Brought up in a city, I didn't even know all the people on my own street, which is not an uncommon situation for city dwellers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing that, because too many times I think within the Cayman context, even if we were to compare ourselves to other islands within the Caribbean, that we think the experience that we had is the same experiences that they had. And worse yet, if we were to assume that, well, Brooklyn and the BRAC, maybe the only similarities would be that the first two letters, of each name, BR for the BRAC and the Brooklyn, that community that you are reminded of, we know each other. It was truly the village that was involved and invested in each child and each family, huh?
That's true. That's true. And when listening to these stories, my emotions just went around the gamut. I mean, some of these stories are hilarious, some are frightening, and some are poignant, and some are just downright sad.
Yeah, and that is the thing. I like the fact, and thank you too for sharing it with us, right? That some are sad, and there are many stories that we don't relay. Somehow we don't recall, and even worse so, we don't record, because there's the sadness, there's the emotion, and we may be sensitive and perhaps trying to be respectful and not doing so because we don't want to offend. But that is part and parcel of our history, and if we don't have it to hand, what are we losing? Could I ask you then, as we get into it, I like the notion that you call it adventures and misadventures. As little boys, probably little girls as well, but as little boys, we were up to a lot, going to and from school, perhaps on weekends when we are away from our assigned chores, and just the fun and the folly that we get up to.
That's true.
But then
from children today,
mm-hmm.
it is so different than in the past, and that's one of the reasons I decided to document the story
mm-hmm.
for our family or whoever else may be interested.
Mm-hmm.
But today when we drive to Bovey Point, we never see children playing outside anymore. Do children even run to First Key to catch fish for dinner anymore? They enjoyed its time.
Yeah. And I think, too, I look back on that, and even as a parent, we are constantly saying to our children, come off your devices, but the devices we bought for them. And yet when they go outside, we are close to them because we are concerned and cautious, not just for their safety, but, what may be transpiring. So that marked shift in our society, not just the lack of involvement in our community and relative and the rearing of our children, but also the things that are transpiring around us. That change has not always been positive, huh?
That's true. I think probably much more so in Grand than here on the BRAC. Because I still think we have a little bit of a community, more of a community feel. I may be totally wrong with that, but
I think you're right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's an example, though, because we can look at what has taken place in Grand Cayman. We can say whether it's progress, whether we can say there's a forward sort of momentum. But if we're concerned about the loss in the community, that sense of value that we had and love and respect for one another, we can just look to our friends and family who are in the BRAC and say, hey, that was once how it was here. What do we do to regain that, or if we have it, to retain it?
Well, it's kind of a shame because while it may be very interesting to be on your cell phone, you're missing so much of your own island that you're living in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the creativity of being a child is gone.
Mm-hmm.
How many kids play cricket with a coconut limb and a ball to a coconut that fell from a tree?
Yeah.
Huh?
I think back to that, and I did not directly, share any of the stories with anybody just yet, and I won't without, But as I was recalling some of them that you had shared with me, to think that back then, well, Mr. George and others like my father, probably out of necessity, the coconut limb and the dry coconut was probably what they had. In my day, it might have been the good fortune to find, as my mother would call it, a piece of scantling, a piece of lumber plywood somewhere about that was just, left somewhere that you could use and mold into a bat-like structure.
Right. They made their own ships out of half of a dried coconut. Maple leaf was the sail.
Mm-hmm.
Of a milk can litter was the rudder.
Yep.
And it was fun. And a lot of kids don't know the geography. They don't even know where to live. We've mentioned some of the keys and the kids, like, they give you just a blank stare. Black Key, Bamboo Key, Man of War Key, Devil's Hole. These are natural heritage. This is Caymanian heritage.
And I have such a respect and admiration. You know, you say you've been married 52 years. If you look at our parents, you know, some who may be 70 plus. You know, my aunt, you know, 100 plus, and her and, you know, her husband before they passed. Yeah, felt like they were married for that 100 years almost.
Right.
That love, that sacrifice, that commitment and devotion that you have for each other. Maybe we in the younger generation could probably take a page and understand that nothing was easy, nothing came overnight. But for some reason, we're just willing to tear down and move on. Yeah,
well, tearing down is okay as long as you wrote down somewhere about you tore down. I know, like where I grew up in America, I'm sure other countries like Great Britain, etc. The history was a required course in high school. Do you know? I may be wrong, but I don't know that they teach Cayman history here. Do you know?
That has always been a very topical, emotive, and sometimes controversial. We would probably harken back to whatever history may have been European history. We may have even had a little Caribbean history, and even now with the introduction and sort of publication of some of the Caymanian history, I say this carefully, and I say this not just with respect, but with a desire to ensure that it's accurate. And there are some questions relative to even what we have recorded and to what extent it is being, you know, sort of communicated to our society and our students. But in that, sorry.
History is a controversial thing because every country's history has warts. You know, there's things you are proud of, and there are things that the country isn't proud of. I think that's part of every country's, every being's history.
Right. But as I listen to you and I look back just to the names of places, two things constantly are at the forefront of my mind. You saw it, or you see it on the back. We see it here in Grand Cayman, where what was the name for a particular place, not just the street, not just the key, not just a particular area within the district, has changed. And whether it's because we don't like the name of that place, we think is. I take, for instance, you know, I love the name Crab Hole Road, right? But for some of us, they may be offended by that. We also see people as they come in, not necessarily out of disrespect or insensitivity, just lack of awareness, decide that this thing, I mean, take Tiki Beach. You know, to me that is horrendous. Take on Grand Cayman again, the public beach. It was the public beach because that was the public beach, and now it's 7 Mile. It may seem insignificant, but it isn't.
Let me tell you. I'm a nurse. I used to work at Faith Hospital.
Yes, ma'am.
And when they first introduced street name, now you have to remember that everybody on the BRAC knows everybody on the BRAC. And so when somebody called in an emergency, they said, well, go to Mr. or somebody's person's named house. The ambulance knew exactly where to go. But then they decided to name the streets. So they named everywhere from the middle of the island to the east end, Spot Bay Road, and everywhere from the other side, West Bay End Road. So we get a 911 call, go to 273 West End Road. And the guys would go all the way to West End when the house was two houses down from where the hospital was. You know, and this was really, they had to change it. They had to by districts, which is the way most people think here.
And I appreciate you highlighting that, because this is where it's, from what I understand, I won't pretend to have the same acumen as my father or my brothers when it comes to the marine environment, but take a ship coming into port. The captain's a great captain. He understands the high seas, but when he is going to come into harbor, you know, the port master, you know, sort of coming on the local knowledge, that is helpful when you take the harbor master, bring the ship into port, because they understand that particular locale. Maybe we as a people aren't appreciative that as we try to advance, as we try to adopt and implement, you know, international accepted good practices, sometimes they need to be tailored for the local sort of situation, as it were, right? Your example with the 911 is probably very much similar to what we may have experienced here in Grand Cayman. A wonderful, valiant effort, but perhaps not at the initial stages significantly cognizant and respectful of what we have here. I'm sure you're,
Well, the names of some of these places are they're dramatic, but they're charming. I think that's part of the beauty of the islands, as far as I'm concerned.
It is.
By changing them, it makes it more sterile.
And we lose sensitivity, right? We lose connection. And we may think, for me, it was the impetus for the show Ray Banker, the Siwa Saying show that we do to Ray Banker. We were having a chat one day, and there's this wonderful, constructed road that lets access in another district, much easier for some. But there's this, nice little sign that helps us to identify where we're going for those who don't. And it's now called, BATA. And instead of being Bottomanu, or if you're a real good West Bayer, Botanu, it's not that you're trying to be proper. Is that in so doing, maybe you're being insensitive. Barkas is Barkas, it's not Barkers. No matter how you spell it, it needs to be said the way it is.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we have a place called Dead Man's Point here. I want to see a change, personally.
Yeah. I mean, only because he's reminded us publicly, Captain Paul here in Grand Cayman. When we think of coming around the Southwest Point here on Grand Cayman, there's a particular point where they understand, it's said the way it is, and why is that way? Well, if you understand the currents and if you don't pull, you know the consequence. We need to be sensitive to that.
I think years ago, I may be wrong, but I think a lot of Caymanians, this is from my perspective, and I could be totally off here, but they seem to value a foreigner's input more than their own.
What is it the scripture says? A prophet is not without honor, save in his own country, huh?
Yeah.
And this is why I appreciate, having a chance not just to read what you've penned, and not just that you and your husband have been so diligent in recording it, but it helps us. We still live in a society where there's a strong oral history, but we don't appreciate the importance of recording that for future reference.
Right. I agree. My husband, George, wrote a book called Booby Point and the East End Keys. What we did is document. We took pictures of every single house in Booby Point, Spot Bay, and some of those houses are no longer there. Some of the very important people are no longer there, and there's not a blade of grass to say John Smith lived here. Yeah. And he took some of the very important people from this area and wrote little histories of them.
Well, that is so instructive and so crucial. Now we're going to pause quickly and take a break. When we come back, could we ask of you, if you so choose, what are some of your favorite stories that he has related to you? If you want to share of any bits and pieces from some, you'll be led. Think about it during the break and let us know. Would that be fine?
That would be fine, and I would be delighted to do it.
Okay, well, Miss Liz Walton on the phone from the BRAC. The connection is so clear, you would think that she was right here. And she is, in spirit and in truth. So stay tuned for Talk Today.
You see how hard it's raining?
Yeah, and I don't have time to fight traffic and get my lunch from Subway. I have so much work to do.
Why don't you order Subway by using the Let's Eat or Bento app? Save time, stay dry, and get your sandwich fast.
I never thought of that. Great idea. I'm going to order now.
Order me a veggie pizza while you're at it.
And a cookie platter for the office.
Too busy at work or home? Is the rainy weather stopping you from dining out? Order your favorite Subway sandwich, wrap, or pizza through the Let's Eat or Bento app with fast and reliable delivery. Subway, eat fresh.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean and comfortable environment, no long lines and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointment.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Ask our professional team about the benefits of cutting-edge technology with MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
Did you know that ValueMed Pharmacy has a free online prescription service? Managing your health and medical requirements has never been easier with ValueMed. Simply visit value-medpharmacy.com. That's VALU-medpharmacy.com and click the Refill Prescriptions tab on our website. Fill in the information for new prescriptions or refills and choose your preferred pickup location. ValueMed on Walkers Road or Town. Then bring in your original prescription from your doctor when picking up. There's no need to stand in line and wait for your prescription. Save time and pick up prescriptions at your convenience by visiting value-medpharmacy.com. That's VALU-medpharmacy.com.
Research tells us that the best age for parents to start having conversations with their children about the dangers of underage drinking is when their kids are 9 years old. Studies show that parents have a significant influence on young people's decision to drink. So talk, they are listening. The NDC offers parents advice on how to talk to their children about underage drinking and prepares you for the tough questions like, did you drink as a child? For tips, log on to www.ndc.ky. This message was brought to you by the National Drug Council and Radio Cayman.
The offices of dermatologist Dr. Wayne Porter will be taking appointments until April 9th at his Crew Road Clinic. Appointments slots are limited. Whether you're seeking advanced skin care, Botox filler, cosmetic skin enhancements, or simply looking to reduce wrinkles, Dr. Porter offers a full-service dermatology and dermatological surgery practice. For more information, email dr.porterkman@gmail.com or call 946-9020 to book your appointment today. That's 946-9020.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And as a reminder, 1 p.m. after headline news, we're going to speak about relationships. Stephanie Dos Santos will be our guest. But now, truly is a pleasure that Miss Lynn Walton on the BRAC is our guest. Join us by the phone, but I can feel her presence right in the studio. So welcome back again, Miss Lynn. Thank you so much, Mom.
Thank you for having me on.
So the adventures and misadventures of a boy from Booby Point.
Mm-hmm.
I just love the title of that one. It rolls so nicely. So we were asking you just prior to the break if there were particular stories, even if there were some that you didn't record, that were your favorite. Were there some that, maybe...
Yes, there are my favorites. But before, I tried to write the stories from the perspective of George as a young boy with the vernacular of the day. But just remember, I'm from Brooklyn, so my rendition of the Brackers accent years back a little wanting.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to read off just a few of the titles, and I'm hoping that no one is offended by the titles, but you don't have to remember, these are stories, they're true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can I read a few of the titles?
Yes, Mom.
Pissing on a dusty road walking backwards, hooking my best friend Bassie instead of a fish, who took Mama's fish, skinny dipping, thatch tree duppies, charming the parrot off its perch, curse of the civil orange, learning under the schoolhouse floor, and rare steak in our pockets. There are 38 stories, but that's some of the titles. I think one of my favorites is called Forbidden Booby Egg Punch. Would you like me to read it? Hello? Mm-hmm. I don't know if the connection...
No, we pressed the button. There, I'm sure you can hear me now.
Yes, I can.
I would love you to read. I did hear your question, and sorry you couldn't hear my response, but yes, please.
Okay. The book is titled Forbidden Booby Egg Punch. My older brothers and their friends wouldn't let any of us smaller boys hang around them. So, of course, we wanted to know what they did when they didn't want us to see. My friends and I would hide in the bush and watch them when they got together. one of the things they did was to make and eat egg punch made out of booby eggs. So, of course, we wanted to do it too. We watched them real careful and knew exactly what to do. But our parents all told us boys that we were forbidden to eat booby eggs till we were older, because it would make us mannish too early. We didn't know what mannish was, but if it was forbidden, it must be really good. We wanted it anyway. So a few of us would climb the bluff and get the booby eggs from the nest high up on the bluff. To make egg punch, we needed a bowl, a plate, a fork, and lots of sugar and some lime. None of us was rich, and our parents didn't have a lot of stuff, just enough for each one in the family. So each of us stole one thing so they wouldn't notice that anything was missing. We all had to steal some sugar, because sugar was sometimes hard to get, and our mamas kept a good check on how much sugar was left in the sugar jar. Well, we hid far away in the woods on Long Beach. We separated the white part of the booby egg and threw away the yellow part. We was also careful to take out the eye of the white part because we knew it would make the egg punch rank, smelly. We beat the white part of the booby egg till it was stiff enough to keep the fork standing up when we turned the dish upside down. We squeezed in some green lime to cut the fishy odor. Then we shared up the booby egg punch and ate it. We expected to feel mannish right away, whatever that was. But nothing happened, except our voices sounded like we was a bunch of girls. So we went home. My papa asked me something when I got in the house, and when he heard my girly voice, he knew what it meant, that I disobeyed him. He made me get my own rosemary switch for him to give me a flogging with. My older brothers was laughing at me when I was crying. I heard him say that when you eat booby punch, something in the eggs coats on a voice box and makes Anna talk like a girl. But they didn't know that I also heard him say that if you squeeze a green lime down your throat, it washed that stuff away and Anna sounded natural. A few days after my bunkie cooled down, I shared this secret information with my friends, and we never got caught again.
These short stories sometimes it reminds us of the world history, but also, for many of us, it's our fathers in particular that will relate them. And hopefully, as you share that, we will be drawn to the need to record, but also to share with us. I want to share with you from a quick comment from one of our listeners. It says, blessings to you all. Say, I'm so blessed in hearing Miss Lynn, who was my supervisor. What an honest, peaceful, godly woman. No, not a woman, a lady. Thank you, Miss Lynn, for who you really are.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so, as our listeners share with you, we show their love and their respect. But these stories, though, seeing that there is, as Mr. Roy Boyden will talk about, the Cayman Islands in transition. We see it on Grand Cayman, but we're increasingly seeing it on the BRAC. What do you think of the changes that we're seeing, and almost the changes in the names of places, the seemingly ease with which we've forgotten the names, but the practices?
Well, I do see an awareness of that.
Okay.
And which is the first step towards doing something. I think Caymanians are learning how very special they are and how very special their history was. And before I didn't hear any of that, but now I think they're starting to realize that is a fact. And there are people that are going to do it. I hope there are people that will write their stories or at least record the old people's stories. I know some of that has been done archives, but we need it out where people can see it.
Yeah. If I can ask of you, then perhaps through you get more of us to, as you said, acknowledge it, do something about it. There is, for whatever reason, maybe it's the same elsewhere, but we focus on the Cayman Islands, this almost willingness to accept the opinion of someone from outside much more readily and easier than the same opinion from someone from the inside, as it were. So maybe hearing others who've come and lived and visited and resided with us, that we have this special history, we need to preserve it. Maybe hearing that more often will remind us of the importance. How do we get, so two things, how do we get those who've come, whether they've been here for 50 years or they've only been here for 5 minutes and they see the beauty, to join with us so that together we sing a chorus to champion and promote and preserve what is that thing that attracted us in the first place. So how do we do that? How do we get everybody together?
I think it is starting because before, people here were not highly educated. It was a rare person that was educated, well educated. So I think, therefore, it was easy to be condescending to someone else who they thought was more educated than themselves, even though education doesn't necessarily mean intelligence at all.
Doesn't mean academic in terms of people.
Yes.
Okay.
And now you are getting a lot of Caymanians who are becoming college educated.
Mm.
And they are the ones who are looking around, I think, and seeing their own value. And I think education is the key.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, you had to depend on other people. You didn't have the people who had the right occupations, who were actually educated in those fields. And now they are. We need more teachers. We need more, because like history, you can't write history if you don't know it.
Right. And that leads me to the second question. When we record, to do so truthfully, we see throughout history attempts to revise some of the accounts to make it look good in the eyes of whomever's writing it, or to reflect positively on it. And that I think of two things: the African proverb that talks about not until the lion gets a biographer, the hunter will always be the hero. But then this need almost to sanitize, to let the thing be presented in a way that almost takes away from the truth. How do we ensure? I looked at your stories, for instance, and just the titles that you have given to it, just the way that you've accurately recorded what he's relayed. How do we make sure that in it the truth is there, whether it's the good, the bad, or the indifferent?
I think it's human nature to try and tell people all our good points,
mm-hmm.
and sort of hide or not quite mention those things which aren't so wonderful about.
Mm-hmm.
And I say it as an individual, but I meant it as a community, as a country. I think history can't. You need a group to write history, not one person's history.
Right. I think too that's where the respect and the almost reverence we should have for a culture, a people, so that we accurately portray it. Now, in that, it's not just in the education system, but it's in our homes, in our communities where we gather.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But hopefully this will, or conversations like this,
mm-hmm.
will encourage people to step up. And I saw one video that Quincy did about
mm-hmm.
the language and how it's changed and how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very well done. And we shouldn't give away, I say we because...
Thank you for saying we.
But the country shouldn't give away those things that are truly unique to it.
Yeah.
I understand wanting to educate everybody and speak properly as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other aspects of the society which don't be so quick to give away. At least write down the history.
Mm-hmm.
Write the stories of the old people and actually publish them.
Mm-hmm.
Stick them in some archive where nobody's going to look for them, except in 100 years from now.
I'm very grateful to a good friend who very early on said to me, it's one thing to introduce your children and yourself
mm-hmm.
to publish works to the sort of internationally accepted best books and practices, but you need in that sort of education to be mindful of how equally important it is to pay attention to your vernacular, to not lose sight of your jargon, your colloquialisms.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I did it almost by default. And then when I wasn't aware of it very consciously and deliberately, I make no apology that sometimes my V's and my W's become one and the same. Right?
That's exactly. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But just to, even though we might not speak that way,
mm-hmm.
to have it somewhere that this is where we came from and it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
we all want to advance, and we all have to speak to the rest of the world as they can understand. So proper English. Look, I have a Brooklyn accent.
No, you do.
So, it's not quite as heavy as it used to be, but it's there. Me, and it's part of who I am.
Now, and only to maybe highlight what you share with your accent. Just now you used the word C-A-R-E, right? Care. Perhaps in a strong Brooklyn accent that may come out a little bit differently than how you said it. It was just very, very subtle. But why should we not celebrate our accents and our jargon, our colloquialisms, the vernacular that makes us who we are?
Do you notice that when people of a certain group get together, exactly that?
Exactly. And that's the beautiful part of what makes us, hopefully human. Maybe it's not just the opposable thumbs that separate us from the apes, but the fact that, we can congregate and be reminded of who we are, that DNA that informs us. If I might, though, because I think through you, we should get a stronger appreciation of who we are, but also of what we are at risk of losing, if not too late, maybe we're on a precipice. How do we get that? Because I give us an example. I hope I don't. Well, if I do, you let me know. So a good family member travels from Grand Cayman to the BRAC and is met by another family member. And as they're leaving the airport to go wherever they need to go, there's grumbling and complaint because there's so much traffic on the road. And the one from the back says, well, there's only one car in front of us. What are you talking about? It's like, all this traffic, right? Anyway, I thought it was hilarious, so thank you for laughing too.
Well, we lost. I wanted to mention one thing here on the BRAC that they no longer do, which was so beautiful and inclusive. It's called a smell neck. BRACers will know what I'm talking about. But when you were welcome into somebody's house, they used to hug you and give you a little sniff by the neck, and they say, "Oh, so sweet." And for some reason, there was some American who decided that was sexual. It had nothing to do with sexuality. It was an inclusive thing. You did it to men, to women, to children. And it was a lovely thing of acceptance, and it's gone.
Let me smell your neck.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then you say, then you do a little sniff, and then as you hug the person, and you say, "Oh, so sweet."
Yep.
Brackers were very tuned into smells. They didn't like odors. They cooked outside, and they were very, very clean people. So, and there was no such thing as I'll smell somebody's neck and it's not going to smell good. It always did, unless you maybe just came from working.
Even then, it didn't smell too bad. Right? Yeah. But it's that term of endearment, right? And we grew up, and I'm not trying to say other people weren't the same, but because this is where we live and we grow and we know, we grew up with a mantra, and it was an established practice. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Your homes and your person, you kept it as tidy. There's a wonderful lady. She gave me the privilege of, being a coach in her son's life, and she would always say the same words that my mother would repeat. Not just because you're poor, you have to be nasty.
Exactly.
And their houses, their yards. I mean, you could probably be in Nissan yard and drop, some sticker toffee like thing and probably eat it because it's so clean. Not that you would, but they kept their person and their property pristine.
Exactly, and they swept it up. And if it was Saturday night, you better not fresh sand. The kids had to back clean sand every once in a while.
Yep.
For the yard.
Yeah, but I'm so appreciative that you would take this time to share with us and take part of your afternoon, and hopefully, as the objective was, that we start to reflect, not just we who have been here for the longest of time, not just we who may have been here for decades or for minutes, but we who are here now, respecting the we that have gone before, so that the we that come thereafter can also share in what about the blessings of this place,
Well put.
Can I ask maybe of you, and not just as as a wonderful wife, as a nurse, but just as someone who is very vested in our community, if you had to share with those listening, from the politically appointed and elected to just the promise of the people as they look at potential career options, what is that thing that we need to do if we are not doing, or continue doing if we are, to ensure the safety, the security, and the stability of this society?
I think the number one thing is what we are doing is that educating our young.
Mm-hmm.
We need teachers, and we need those teachers themselves do not know Cayman history. That needs to be taught.
Mm-hmm.
To be a curriculum of Cayman history, because we have teachers from all over the world, and they can only teach from their perspective or what whoever is in charge of making the curriculums are giving them. So we need, in my opinion, an account is that somebody needs to write a history that is accepted, not in a closet by themselves, and then it needs to be put into a format that is taught in the schools so that the children learn it. I think the more educated you are, the more you know about where you come from, the more you can value yourself.
Knowledge is powerful. It's also empowering, and education is the great equalizer. And I really appreciate, you taking this time. And I'm hoping and praying that God's willing, we'll have a chance to sit in person in fellowship, and you can, encourage me as I encourage others. Right?
You do encourage others, and I commend you on your program.
Well, thank you. And I think in this discussion, this exchange, I'm doubly blessed because I rarely publicize, the recipient of anything. But one of our wonderful listeners, Miss John, shared from her backyard, some lovingly grown peppers. And for me, that's just another indication of what is the Cayman warm, loving hospitality. We share and share alike. You've shared the stories that your husband related to you. She's sharing of her labor and love in her backyard garden. And this is what we do. If we want to get better, we need to work together.
That's it.
But thank you, Mom. I can't tell you how much of an honor it was to been able to share. I know you had shared that the publication was just a labor, love, and an exercise, and it may not be readily available. But if you want, if it is, and people would want copies, is that possible? We have a request off here asking whether the stories are available anywhere.
Well, actually, I only printed 25 copies. I didn't think anybody would really be that much interested in it. But if they are, I can order more, but I would have to know that. And we're listed in the regular phone book under Lynn and George Walton. I'm sure Lynn and George or George Walton. Who uses a regular phone book anymore? My cell number is 325-3474 if somebody is truly interested. It is a hardbound book, and the cover is color, so it's not an
but it's worth it. It's worth it.
So, but if they are there, please contact me, and we'll see what we can do.
All right. But thank you, and I trust and pray this will not be only our last public encounter, but it gives us a chance to really reminisce, but to respect what it is to live in this country. So thank you very much, Ms. Lynn.
I feel blessed to be able to live in your country, sir. All right. Thank you, too.
God bless, Mom. Thank you, too. And this is what makes this country remarkable. And I'm sure you feel the same way about where you live and work. And if you don't, see how you can add value to it. It's easy to point fingers and to blame. Trust me, we all know that. Maybe with a little bit more effort, we find that it's easier to make a positive contribution. With that, when we come back, rejoin us. Ms. Stephanie Dos Santos will be our guest. We're going to talk about relationships. And this is the important thing, we are working in the financial services sector. Used to be a time when you were a relationship manager. Perhaps we see it in the healthcare sector where, bedside manners was probably a term you may have heard, perhaps even from your parents. Maybe hear it again. Relationships of all signs is what binds us together. So let's stay tuned and join us in the next conversation.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. Official state funeral proceedings have begun in honor of Mr. Benson O. Ebanks, MBE, at 9:45 a.m., with a ceremonial lowering of the Cayman Islands flag to half-mast outside the Government Administration Building on Elgin Avenue. Senior government officials will pay their respects at an official lying-in state, continuing until 2 p.m. During this time, members of the public are invited to attend the House of Parliament to file past the coffin, a individual party from the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service will watch over the proceedings. Mr. Benson O. Ebanks passed away on Tuesday, March 29, 2022. In international news, Russian troops were heard discussing killing civilians in the Ukrainian town of Bucha in messages intercepted by German intelligence, German media says. Some of the radio traffic tracked by the BND intelligence agency appears to match locations of bodies just outside Kiev. Ukraine says more than 300 civilians were killed by the Russians in Bucha. Moscow denies any involvement. After a COVID infection, there is an increased risk of developing a serious blood clot for the next 6 months, a study from Sweden suggests. The research found people with severe COVID and those infected during the first wave had the highest clot risk. Scientists have presented a stunningly preserved leg of a dinosaur. The limb, complete with skin, is just one of a series of findings emerging from the Tanis fossil site in the U.S. state of North Dakota. But it's not just their exquisite condition that's turning heads. It's what these ancient specimens purport to represent. The claim is the Tanis creatures were killed and entombed on the actual day a giant asteroid struck Earth, the day 66 million years ago when the reign of the dinosaurs ended and the rise of mammals began. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
The Tuesday and Thursday edition of The Business Buzz is brought to you by
Cayman Medical Supplies, providing quality pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, and consumer products to healthcare providers, retailers, and ultimately the patients at a reasonable rate in a friendly, caring, and timely manner. Cayman Medical Supplies is located at number 93 Smith Road, Windward Center. Telephone 949-6211.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
It's Kirk Freeport's 50th anniversary, and we're celebrating with you. If it's your 50th birthday in 2022, we have a $50 gift card for you. If you're celebrating your 50th wedding anniversary or higher, it's $500. We'll also donate $50,000 to charities and increase the rewards for store purchases, too. Purchases of $500 will receive branded gifts, while purchases of $100 gain entry into our monthly sweepstakes with prizes from luxury brands. View terms and conditions on KirkFreeport.com.
Subway is serving up a special new sauce, bursting with flavor in every bite. The new Savory Collection is a tropical sweet and spicy sauce made with a combination of spices, habanero peppers, thyme, onion, black pepper, ginger, citrus juices, and molasses.
So good.
Wow.
Sensational. Delicious.
Subway's Savory Collection pairs perfectly with our oven roasted chicken or steak sub. Savor the flavor. For a limited time, only at Subway. Subway. Eat fresh.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean, and comfortable environment, no long lines, and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointments.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Ask our professional team about the benefits of cutting-edge technology with MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And We've always honored, and for me, it truly is a privilege and a pleasure to be able to sit here and facilitate discussions, and hopefully it engages, entertains, encourages, and hopefully educates and informs. And now to welcome once again Ms. Stephanie Dos Santos to our studio. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's great that we live in such a small space and place where we can, if we are conscious of it, easily appreciate how our interactions impact and affect each other, positively or negatively. And if we are genuine in our engagements, we get so much from it. Listening sometimes for some people is a challenge because we're so distracted, but also we don't appreciate the effort. So as we listen to you today, we'll come away much better position.
That's a good sign.
Yep, definitely it's objective. I shared just prior to the break that our discussion will focus on relationships. And I think sometimes, and I'll be guided by you as you know, your expertise and experience will help us. When we hear that word relationship, we are probably rightly inclined to think of a relationship between individuals, but sometimes it extends beyond that. And it doesn't have to be the amorous relationship. It can be others. It could be platonic, it could be transactional, it could be commercial, it could be all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So in that context, maybe, help us to get to where we want to go. Relationships to you, significant, important, right?
Yes, because it involves commitment.
Ah, okay.
And I guess a lot of issues, if I may say, come from the fear of commitment.
Fear of commitment. You see, I would, commit to that, but I'm not sure why. I'm afraid to commit to commitment.
Yeah, so first it's important to define what is commitment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And commitment is to put all your energy into something.
Mm-hmm.
So when we fear of committing,
mm-hmm.
it's because we're fearing losing something.
Huh. So we rather not attempt because the outcome could be. Why is it that's so scary? If we want to exercise, for instance, we want to get healthy, we're told that in order to get somewhere, you got to start somewhere. A good habit takes a while to become part of who you are.
Yep.
Right? No matter what that is. And if we don't commit, your parents say, you got to stick to this. I paid for those lessons and you're going to honor that commitment.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is that we fight the non-commitment to that thing. But if we need to understand where the what is the fear of commitment in the first place, because there's not such things as not being committed. If you want it or not, you're committed to something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not committing to exercise, you have to understand what is it then that I'm committed to. And if you're not committing to exercise, then you might be committed to control what you eat. Or you might be committed to manage your movement so you don't get hurt. So if you want it or not, you are committed to something.
Yeah. Some people talk about commitment. Some people use the word perseverance. Some said, I'm just driven and motivated and so on. Are they all part of it, or is commitment that thing that trumps it all, is above and beyond the rest of it? You need to be in it.
It's really putting your energy into something. Like all of yourself into it.
Okay.
So let's, for the example of not exercising, it's very often we go into exercise because we hate our bodies. That's a reality. That's why we don't commit fully, because we're not acknowledging that what is going on is that we are committed to the polar opposite, which is to manage, that very thing. So then it's like, okay, I'm not committed to exercise. First, you have to admit it to yourself. Therefore, what is it that I'm committed to? And it can be I'm committed to control everything that I eat, or put myself not practicing violent sports cars, or do anything like that because my body is not as strong, so I could put my body at risk. Then you ask yourself, is it something that I really want to be committed to? And this is one of the steps, it's all a process that we have to go through in order to shift, from a commitment that is not serving our purpose towards something that is going to serve us.
So is it self-awareness then?
Absolutely. And then there's also this a step that is crucial, is to be present and sit with the consequences of not being committed. Because the truth is, we are not going to bring any change to our lives if we don't see the benefits of it. If we don't see that what we're doing, there's nothing wrong with it, you're not going to change it just because someone tells you, oh, this is good for you.
So we have to acknowledge to ourselves that...
the resistance to the thing. Yeah, absolutely. This is the global problem, right? It's like we push aside negative emotions, but we don't realize that we push so much aside. Like even that thing, it's like we don't even acknowledge that we are committed to something like on the opposite spectrum of it.
Okay. I will use me as an example, just hopeful to highlight, because it's easier sometimes. I tell people to point fingers at others. Let's not do that. Let's point the spotlight on ourselves. I don't care for guns. That shouldn't be anything that surprises anybody. I believe diplomacy would be a better answer than war. And in saying that publicly and even privately, I have unknowingly at times offended the very people I don't intend to. As an example, for us to achieve something, I think it would be better if we sat across the table and we broke bread. Piece of cassava cake, a custard top cornbread, perhaps just a glass of water or some coconut water, or whatever. And that dialogue maybe will come to some semblance of a resolution if there's a mutual respect and deference.
Yeah, you have to be able first to agree, to be fully open to receive what the other person is going to say, with the conscious effort of not judging us or being right or wrong. It's not about being right or wrong.
But then that's would probably...
Because actually, I mean, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
No, because, I mean, then it's discussing like coping mechanisms in order to keep yourself safe. So what I'm about, it's really going to the core of everything.
Right.
You know, like shifting from the core, understanding why we're here, why we behaving the way we behave. Why is it so hard to commit in relationships, for example? And it comes back down to childhood.
Does it?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does. It's basically children, including myself, that grew up with a message sent by parents that it's like, if you're being a good girl, then I will love you. If you are being a good girl, then you will get what you want.
So that needs.
So therefore, it just brings a strong sense of emotional unsafetyness, which is why we've got one foot in and one foot out.
Yeah. And I wonder if, as parents, since it's the parental issues, if we are conscious of what we're doing, or if we're doing this unconscious, to where the child wants that approval, or wants to feel validated, or wants to feel the love from the parent by getting the good grades, by being a good girl, by doing the chores, by behaving, and you think you're raising a well-adjusted, disciplined, respectful child.
Well, the discipline, it's like, because we are too concerned about raising good kids instead of mentally, emotionally, physically healthy kids. It's to fit in. We don't even realize, but our conditioning is pushing us to some extent to keep sending those keep propagating those conditionings through children.
I wonder in asking this, as I think the societal norms. So let's take as an example, there's the parent and there's the child, or the parents and the children, and they're having a discussion, and the child is actively debating with the parent about the particular issue. The child has a view, and the parent's intent may be to help the child to, you have an opinion, learn to formulate your thoughts and to argue your position. But the onlookers, other family members in the wider community, may see that engagement as, this little child is an upstart, disrespectful. How dare you question your parent?
Yeah, we dismiss the child's emotion because we think it's an extension of who we are, without understanding it's a complete, independent being.
Yeah.
And his needs and his boundaries are going to be different than yours.
Right.
So from that moment, like what you're describing, that situation, it's doing damages because you're completely not hearing the kid. Therefore, he's not going to feel seen. He's not being validated. Therefore, everything that he has to say is going to understand in his mind that, okay, if I speak my mind, like I'm being shut up, and they're not happy with me. You see, that's the principle of, if you're being a good boy, if you do what I'm telling you, then I'm going to love you.
Right. But then, by the same token, we maybe it's what it was way back when. Maybe it's still the same. Don't take gifts from strangers. Don't accept this in return for that. So, from that example, the child and the parent may feel the conscious presence of the onlooker, and so the parent may withdraw this engagement. Because they're feared of condemnation by the other adults, or the child may decide, well, wow, I'm being judged as being disrespectful, let me not continue, where the intent was, as you shared, to have that engagement. So the parent consciously trying to instill within the child that you have a voice, let's hear it, learn to formulate your voice. How do we get that societal shift then, that this person is actually a person, just happens to be a bit younger, and maybe in some cases, a little bit physically smaller?
Well, we need to first stop wanting to reach perfection.
I
want my kid to be so perfect and respectful, and so like that is going to have a perfect life, and it's going to make lots of money studying engineering or whatever.
But then, if we
see, let's take an example that happened yesterday.
Okay.
There's my friend from Canada, and he called me because he wanted to share with me what happens with his son. Because since they have separated with the mother, the child is being really, he says, sometimes annoying. He wants it's his way all the time, to the point that if he wants to play video games and he's like, Daddy, let's play that video game. I want you to play my video game. He's never going to stop. And he's like, I have to tell him, Stephanie, that it's, a no is a no, and it's important to respect it, and so on. And I said to him, it is a fair point. Also, your son is trying to catch your attention, and this is the way he's doing it. Your child, by wanting to have control on how the afternoon is going to play out, what game you're going to play, it's its sense of gaining control, because your son has a sense of powerlessness in his life at the moment. So it's a first step to acknowledge what's going on. It's also our responsibility to take the child when it's happening like this and to ask him, if I say no to you right now, how does it feel? Because the child is obviously stressing, because it's like, I need to have my, I need to have my way. So what we need to do is to actually put the child on a chair or laying down and say, you know what, close your eyes. Where is this feeling in your body? And very often it's going to be on your chest or on your tummy. And then you help the child to identify it, because we fear very often what we can't perceive, what we can't touch, what we can't really visualize, what we don't know. So then you prompt the kid, and you can do it with adults. It works wonderfully. I do it on myself, every time that a situation like that happens. And it's like so the child may say, okay, it's gray. It's like a wall, and you ask, what is it made of? It could be made of glass, it could be made of concrete, it could be made of metal. And you help the kid tuning into it, and then you ask, what is it serving here? And all the single time, it's going to have a purpose of protecting.
So we then need to be consciously aware of who we are, where we are, what we're feeling.
Absolutely. Our emotions, even the one that we feel super uncomfortable and that we're dying to run away from. All emotions are part of our inner guidance system.
So we hear people saying, oh, my gut tells me this, they have this gut feeling about. And they will probably tell you that every time they ignore that gut feeling, it's to their detriment.
Absolutely.
But yet we're willing to ignore it.
Because that's the process of socialization. Because we're born relationally dependent, you learn from a very young age that for your that you've got part of yourself that are acceptable and that some that are not. So therefore, what's going to be happening, because we are relationally dependent, you're going to push under the rug aspects of you that are actually those very parts that makes you who you are in your own uniqueness.
Okay. That relational dependence that we have, thinking to the word that you shared with us a few times, boundaries.
Yeah.
It's something that perhaps many of us don't even realize, that we've become the doormat. We have no boundary, and we're not.
Yeah. We're pleasing people very often because we think this is how we're going to be loved and appreciated.
The acceptance that we're seeking, even unconsciously.
Yeah. But first, if we really realize even like why it's so scary for people to commit in relationships as well, is because very often we've got no awareness of what are our needs and our own boundaries, and we just like meet the other people, the other person's needs, and eventually, because we don't meet our own and because we don't know what they are, so we're unable to communicate to them, we end up resenting the person and feeling like we've been taken advantage of.
And that resentment can grow, and then could it help to inform our next encounter with someone, whatever that relationship is. It could be a transactional. You're purchasing something, and the cashier may be a certain, or you may be the cashier, and you're receiving the payment for something. So that could make that engagement, even as temporary as it is, very negative.
Yeah, but you see, even on that, even if you end up being really upset by saying, oh, I'm feeling used and taken advantage of. I mean, even that, what is it telling you? Have you it? And this is very often like it's guiding you towards addressing what is it really that you need. And the problem as well is that there's few reasons why we don't know what our needs are and why we're scared of sharing them. And the number one, it's because we're scared that if we tell people what our needs are, we are scared that it's going to jeopardize the relationship, that we are going to be respected. We don't feel like we have the right to have our needs. And also people don't tell us, we're not getting educated. Okay, what are your needs? What is it that I cannot compromise?
I can see that in a partnership, two individuals who have a partnership. If they don't share...
Or friendship and romantic.
The needs and expectations. I need you, this is what I need. If they don't share that level of communication, then the other doesn't understand that what's being done or not being done is the reason why there's this friction.
Yep. Absolutely, and that's why, I'm working on preparing a workshop to everybody in Cayman is most welcome to come in to actually really tune into what are your needs, what are your boundaries, because it's key to start a healthy relationship with yourself to start with, because you know what you need, so you can go and get it, instead of avoiding commitment, which is basically like putting the energy in to make sure that you're not attracting that very thing you don't want.
Isn't that how it happens? It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't want this thing, but you do this thing unconsciously that brings about the thing you didn't want.
Absolutely. But you see, that's what's interesting, because even with the fear of commitment, it's because we had caregivers that were more interested in control than meeting your needs or like watching for your best interest. It was so... that's why we develop that sense of escapism. We want to have a way out. That's why we've got one foot in, one foot out. Yet we end up growing up repeating the same pattern, because we either have the fear of losing the partner or losing ourselves to the relationship. So that's why we keep ourselves, like a way out by having one foot in and one foot out. And then we wonder why the relationship is not fulfilling.
Yeah. Many of us would appreciate that we have things that we probably have finally, after many attempts, understand and acknowledge that we have the coping mechanisms, whatever that thing is. But we're probably not as conscious that we are, by default, inclined to escape. Some literally will jump in the car and take a long drive. Some will run away from a situation and never return. So this thing to escape, escapism as you referenced, how do we become conscious that that's what we're doing? We're avoiding that conflict, avoiding that, and we do this to escape.
Well, first we have to be at peace with the fact that if we want to escape something, it's because we want to escape what we think is going to cause us pain. So we need to learn how to be with that. Because if we learn to be with that pain, you know, we're not going to be like putting that much energy in trying to keep that pain away. It's like, okay, now I've seen that monster.
You deal with it head on, you acknowledge it, and do you embrace it? Do you endure it? I mean, what do you do? Because this thing that brings you that pain, physical or emotional, most likely.
Emotional, very often,
you don't want, I mean, very few people want pain. A good trainer would say to you, you know, oh, you heard no pain, no gain. No, I don't want you to have any pain, just all gain. You know, the pain shouldn't be punishment. It should.
Well, we should be able to acknowledge the pain for what it is, which is a messenger as well, and move forward with it.
Let's look at the idea of expectations and the word no. Someone asks you something, you're probably inclined to, you know, want to please, but really you want to say no. No, I can't take you where you want to go. No, I can't give you this money. No, I'm not going to do your work for you, whatever the reason is. But we do it and we're like,
Well, at the end, you're not upset with the person, you're upset with yourself, right?
Right.
Because one more time, you're feeling being taken advantage of when you've been probably conditioned to, you know, be a good boy, you know, and help people because it's good, you know. Well, yes, it's a good thing. And you also have your own needs. So if it's taking onto what you need right now or what you're doing that is really important, well, does it...
And I think, too,
it makes sense why you're upset, right?
Exactly. What's interesting, many of us are inclined to say yes without realizing that we're people pleasers. We want that validation, that acceptance, and we don't want to, you know, create a wave. So, you know what, it'll just be a little inconvenience. I'll go left instead of right. It'll take me another 5 hours or 5 minutes, but no big deal. And we do it because we can. And what's interesting is that person who is normally expected to say yes, all of a sudden says no. Have you ever been in a room where that no is echoed and you see the faces and everybody? It's almost as if you've come through with something horrendous and you're like, what? She said no? He said no? What's going on? Is the moon in retrograde? But it's amazing that happens, right?
Yeah, because, you know, we're also creatures of habits and we think, oh, we were able to take that from that person all the time. So we know we can go there to feed. But then suddenly the person says no because maybe the person has been realizing that she or he's not happy. Maybe been having an honest session and like defining what boundaries and needs are.
Well, let's continue with that discussion after a break. If you're listening, you have a question. It's about engaging, informing, empowering, educating, and positioning us so that at the end of the day, we are, you know, happier within. We're
we're able to address those conditionings and the parts of ourselves that we ignore because it was forgotten for that long.
All right. After the break, if you want to shout and share a thought, 949-8037, toll free with the compliments of Flow at 1-800-534-8255. Please stay tuned.
Busy. Feel like there's not just enough hours in the day. Savannah Pharmacy, service to make your life easier. Now you can WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. And pickup is just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays. WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. Savannah Pharmacy, wholesome values with modern conveniences.
CUC reminds you to always be aware of power lines. Before operating machinery, erecting scaffolding, trimming trees, drilling wells, digging holes, or carrying out construction work near overhead or underground power lines, always check with CUC customer service team at 949-5200 or via email at service@cuc.ky to ensure your plan of action is safe. Safety first with CUC.
Radio Cayman News.
A 1-year-old baby girl and her father are killed in a crash Sunday night.
It was reported that 2 masked men entered the premises, one armed with a firearm, the other with a knife, and demanded cash.
Public Health reports the death of another elderly patient due to COVID-19.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice for today's biggest news.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. And thanks for joining us, and thanks too to our guest, Stephanie Dos Santos. We talk about relationships and commitment and the fear of commitment. Some of us believe if we never commit to anything, we don't worry about failure because we didn't take it on. Well, it's not going to happen. Does that then, Ms. Stephanie, cause us to not just not enjoy life and get as much out of it, but nothing ventured, nothing gained is what our parents would tell us, right?
Yeah.
You got to be willing.
Yeah, we think that commitment is going to trap us
Okay.
when it's completely the opposite.
But as you were sharing, and again, the phone lines are open for those who are listening and want to be a part of a discussion. Miss Susan, just very wonderfully stands by and she answers and she says, hey, if you got chocolate, you can talk. And if you don't know, just kidding. It's 949-8037, 1-800-534-8255. I want to ask, though, because in listening to you, I can hear the word selfish. Right? So many of us may think that if we put ourselves first, if we say no, if we establish boundaries, if we communicate our needs and wants, people say, oh, you just think of yourself, you're being selfish. And then there's that negative connotation that we internalize. How do we look at that and say, well, no, I'm not being selfish, I'm being self-aware, I'm being, wellness.
I'm being defined by me because your needs and boundaries, it's everything that defines what you like, what you don't like, your thoughts and feelings in relation to the world. So, and if you ask people who think like that is selfish, well, how is it working for you? Are you feeling happy?
But then we find perhaps refuge in something else. Some it's exercise, something that maybe others don't see as healthy. It could be a relationship, it could be a particular practice, food, drink, or otherwise. So we find this escape, this coping mechanism in this other thing.
It's a coping mechanism. So a coping mechanism is very different than healing. A coping mechanism, it's when you bring a physical or mental shift to a situation that you feel powerless to change. So because you feel powerless with the situation, you think you're going to find like a less painful way to manage this situation.
Okay. But that sounds easier said than done, because for some people, is it that they've become conditioned? They've become, also it's habitual. This is what they do in order to cope with this thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, do you really need to cope? Because, give me an example.
Okay.
Like of a coping mechanism, like alcohol, for example. Like having the glass of wine at the end of the day to cope. Well, when you feel the desire to go into that drink, to that bottle the same night, it's like sit down in the discomfort, or what will rise if you don't have it. I will highly recommend to have someone that knows, what they're doing, that can accompany, and allow the person to go through all those emotions, because they can get very emotional. And this is the key, this is where your key resides.
Okay. Now, some people would quickly acknowledge, perhaps parents in particular, that they're sending an unhealthy message to their children. Just use the alcohol example. After a long day of work or a particular stressful encounter, they may say, well, I deserve it. It's just one drink, a glass, a shot, whatever that thing is. And there is no negative behavior that's manifested in itself after this thing. So everybody's okay. They're not inebriated, they're not abusive, they're not belligerent. There's nothing. They just seem to be okay.
But the thing is, are you genuinely happy? Because it all comes down to you as an individual. Are you genuinely happy? What would happen if you were not to take the edge of that stress? You know, maybe it requires to actually adjust what's going on at work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's really about diving in and tuning into those emotions that will guide you towards something, an environment that will really be more comfortable, a world that you will not have to cope with.
Mm-hmm. In that, and I'm inclined to share that we come to understand conditioning. For some people, let's use the alcohol. They may not smoke, whatever that smoke is, unless they're drinking. They may not drink unless the setting is this particular day of the week, or a particular activity, or a particular event. And yet we don't appreciate how we associate this thing with this thing. So with that conditioning, just as the child has been conditioned unconsciously to seek the approval and validation of the parent by being a good boy, good girl, by getting good attendance at school, by doing your chores, as that goes through life, 10, 15, 30 years later.
Your life until you're gone.
Wow.
This is why we cope.
Yeah. So how do we, well, first off, do we try to reverse that? And if so, how?
Well, it's really tuning into the polar opposite of conditionings. It's like if you realize that, for example, you only encountered people in relationship that take advantage of you.
Okay.
The common factor is you.
All right.
So you have to be willing to have a proper look at yourself, and even to come across like looking at yourself and really not liking what you're saying.
Okay. I'm grateful for the opportunities to engage and interact with people, because I get to learn, especially those who are genuinely wanting to share. And perhaps almost 3 decades ago now, there was a gentleman who, because of certain things that transpired in his life relative to health and the like, he decided that there was a particular day of the week, right? And that day, for whatever reason, had a negative connotation, was particularly stressful, and he, as he said, he arranged that day was be the day that he was not coming into work. Now, there was no such thing as a 4-day work week. Just for the public sort of better understanding, that triggered me to start to read, to understand, well, he's taken 7 days of work. They're the 2 that people traditionally take off. The other 5 days we're expected to work, and he's taking one of those days. Well, friends and family are traveling. I got introduced a few years later to a practice in Germany, and then I kept watching it closely. And then this term that I've only of recent decades come to understand, a 4-day work week, where you're consciously at your desk those 4 days, and then you have the other 3. When he did that, long before I even knew that term existed, he didn't apply it. He was very conscious and self-aware that that day, just that day alone, it could be a Monday for some, it could be a Friday for others, it was just stressful. It was nothing to do with anything other than what that day meant to him. And he said in so doing, he found so much positive benefits. He was better for the other 6 days. His health improved. He got a lot more work done when he was physical at his desk. He got a lot more work done for himself in terms of the chores. Now, it may be challenging for people to understand that back then we didn't have internet, online banking. You had to physically go and pay your bills in person. They even accepted checks. For people not sure what that is, ask your parents, and they may have to ask their parents. So these were things that you had to do physically, and he was much more productive.
Yeah, but he was in tune into his needs.
And this was a man. But it was amazing, and I've never forgotten. We would sit for lunch some days, and he would share with me certain things. And just by adjusting his lifestyle to accommodate what he realized was his response to one day, what that day was, I thought, wow. And, this is not a guy from anywhere other than these 3 islands, But yet, today, if and I use as an example, I've said publicly, we should explore a 4-day work week.
It's working very well in the Scandinavian countries, actually.
It's working exceptionally well.
Yeah.
But you say that and people go, I thought you were ambitious. I thought you were industrious. I thought you were... No, I am actually.
But this is also like conditioning, right? It's like you're only deserving if you work hard, if it was painful.
But yet
it doesn't need to, because the truth is, if we go back to the source, those very parts of you that got pushed aside in order to fit in are the parts that we should bring back to the light, because this is where your uniqueness is. You have a unique talent. You came, in this lifetime for a mission to tune into what you're really good at and give it to the world.
But yet we've heard, no matter the wealth, you can't take it with you. Right?
Yeah.
The pharaohs were built with, when they were buried and entombed with so much. But some years later, the British came and raided it and took it from the tomb. So it was no good to them. At least I didn't think so. Yeah. So what do we do then as we understand this fear of commitment? We understand the importance of to thine own self be true. I'm saying this to you, but I have a lot of work to do on me as well, so that I put me first.
Yeah.
But we're selfish if we put ourselves first. Isn't
well,
that
then
not what we're told?
You have to be ready to face criticism.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, it's like, do I want to spend a life where I'm meeting everybody else's needs without having mine met? And I'm feeling miserable, and therefore, because I'm not emotionally safe, I feel the need to control, because this is the direct consequence of it.
But is it easier said than done? And is it even...
Yes, because we're fearing that if we say what our needs are, that we're not going to be accepted, because this is exactly how we got conditioned.
So I wrote down a word earlier in a discussion, the power position. Whether it's the big nation who's saying to the smaller nation, listen, we have the wealth, the financial, the military, and the might, and you better do this. Now, in the personal relationships, we say, that's a bully. Right? Another word that has been overused and abused and becomes almost a cliche. But it's the parent and the child. It's the spouse to the other spouse. It's the co-worker. It's the supervisor to... how do we...
Get out of it?
Okay, yeah.
Well, there's these steps that I've been working on myself actually as well. It's like to first figure out what is it that you want to commit to? What are you not committed to? Let's start with that. What are you're not committed to? Therefore, what are you committed to?
So
to overcompensate that thing. So if you're not committed to relationship, you might be committed to freedom. If you keep procrastinated, then you're committed to distractions.
Okay, so let's look at our commitment. Think back, perhaps to the examples that many of us could relate to. I certainly can. We use the phrase "the good life." So here's the person working in financial services, making a lot of money but isn't happy, and one day just packs up and says, "You know what? I've had enough of this." They walk away. Even a country song, about take this job, and So we know that, and the wider community, family and friends will say, "Oh, they're going through midlife crisis. They had all these things," and yet not recognizing that the person has said, "But I value my health, my freedom, my liberty, my relationship, my thing more than I value the accolades, the appointments, the promotions, the bonuses." And for us, we see that this person has lost the plot. We even have nice phrases for it.
Yeah, and to me, middle life crisis, it's nothing more than the adult being sick of not knowing who he is.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with my parents, married 40 years, and suddenly my mom just woke up. It's like, I'm asking for divorce.
After 40 years?
After 40 years.
Wow.
So it's just, and we say, oh, it's middle life crisis. No, it's not. When you look at each individual really closely, they don't know who they are, because we've been conditioned to please, meet my parents' needs, because if I'm doing this, then I'm being rewarded and I'm being valued and appreciated.
Societal expectations.
It's exactly the same.
Okay. Well, here's, and I'll say this publicly, and you can guide me if this is the wrong way to apply it. If someone was to say to me, oh, it's a midlife crisis, right? And you're 40 or you're 50 or you're 60, I'm thinking, well, that's a good thing, because midlife at that age means that you got, that many more years ahead. So at 40, you can see 80. At 60, you see 120. So that would be a good midlife crisis, because you got 60 years ahead.
Well, we can avoid that, actually, if we were all to tune into what our needs are.
Okay, after a break, could we ask that? So we've tuned into our needs. You choose the relationship, whether it's a marital relationship, whether it's a business relationship, and you say, listen, I need this, whatever this is. How do we share that need, communicate that need with the spouse, with the boss, a word that I don't really like so much, but how do we share that so that we understand that they know what we need? they see and they somehow help us to meet it. Can we talk about after the break?
Absolutely.
All right. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
A caring and community spirit, cherished family and cultural values. These are some of the things that still embodies the Caymanian way of life in the Eastern Districts today. Savannah Pharmacy, your neighborhood pharmacy, located in Countryside Shopping Village, is delighted to offer products and services of real value. Whether it's catering to your family's medical needs or carrying apparel, gifts, and beauty products, Savannah Pharmacy provides you with more than just prescriptions. Remember, they're always just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours, including Sundays and holidays. Savannah Pharmacy. For more information, call 946-3336.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab. Blood test, x-ray, and mammogram, all of that is MedLab. Affordable fees and friendly service, a full professional team. MedLab is always comfortable, MedLab is always clean. For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Call 949-7331 and ask about MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
As the longest established pensions plan in the Cayman Islands, the Chamber Pension Plan looks forward to delivering the same strong performance for our members, but now in a new location. As of March 1st, our new pensions operation office is located at 14 Saturn Close, Eastern Avenue, the same building as our new administrator's agent, Saxon Administration Limited. A dedicated and experienced team will be assigned to the Chamber Pension Plan. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky, and for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. New location, new administrator's agent, new customer service, same strong performance.
Your Radio Cayman 6 p.m. news, Monday through Friday, is brought to you by Logic. Your life connected.
It's Kirk Freeport's 50th anniversary, and we're celebrating with you. If it's your 50th birthday in 2022, we have a $50 gift card for you. If you're celebrating your 50th wedding anniversary or higher, it's $500. We'll also donate $50,000 to charities and increase the rewards for store purchases too. Purchases of $500 will receive branded gifts, while purchases of $100 gain entry into our monthly sweepstakes with prizes from luxury brands. View terms and conditions on KirkFreeport.com.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thanks for joining us, and thanks to Miss Susan for being on the other end of the table and have to endure, me day in and day out, and that's why she probably takes a vacation now and again. I've had enough. Nah, just kidding. Hey, she's right there if you want to make a phone call and you want to share part, in parts of what we're doing. It was 949-8037, toll free with the compliments of Flo at 1-800-534-8255. Miss Stephanie Dos Santos is our guest. In relationships, commitment. Some powerful words that many men were like, oh, don't want to hear those, man. But even some women. So we were asking just before the break. You shared, know our needs and wants and communicate them with the people in our lives. So whether it's the husband and wife, the spouse, whether it's the siblings, whether it's the supervisor and the supervised. Sometimes that power dynamic of that thing, we're not able, we're not willing, we're not sure how, and whether we should. Well, listen, this is what I need. So how do we do that? How do we share to that person, listen, these are my needs and these are my wants?
So in healthy relationships, to start with, your partner should have also your best interest at heart. So you need also to have that intimacy, which is, you can break it down into intimacy. So it's like the ability to hear, to feel everything about the other person. So let's say, I'm in this relationship and I've got, my man does not spend some time with me when it's a need that I have to spend quality time.
Exactly.
you see,
the love languages
is working.
Yeah.
So this is a need. I cannot need what I need because at the end of the day, if that need is not met, it's going to damage my self-confidence. I'm not going to feel safe in the relationship and so on. So I think it's about sitting down with the partner and coming from a place of love. When you express yourself to the other person and not from the wounded place, where it's like, well, you never spend time with me, like I'm sick of it, or do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do? It's unnecessary. You have to be able to tune into love and say, okay, I know you're busy at work and I respect that. I know it's very important. Also, I need, to express to you that what I genuinely need right now more than anything in this relationship is to spend quality time with you.
So that's self-awareness. And maybe we talk about the quality time, because for some of us that's important. For others, it's the notion of being validated by receiving some sort of gift or the like. For some, it's others, and maybe
word of affirmation, act of service, touch, physical touch. Yeah, there's 5 love languages. Right. You can go online and figure out what yours is.
And it's probably important for any relationship, especially for that partnership, whether it's marital or otherwise, that you appreciate what the other's language is, but also your own. So I wrote down 2 words, reciprocated and receptive. So that person you're setting, let's just use it with a partnership. 2 individuals, they sit with each other. One needs to be willing to be receptive to what the other is saying. Hey, I need you to sit. I need you to understand that, this is what I need, quality time. But then it needs to be reciprocated.
Yes, so it's not, I will not want that quality time if it's at the detriment of his work.
Right.
Because then suddenly it's going on one way. It's like, I want you to meet my best interest, but I'm dismissing yours. It's still not healthy. So it's not about one giving it to the other and one having to sacrifice for the other. It's finding that third option there where your needs and mine are going to be met.
So we align.
And this is how we actually have to sit and have a chat on how this can happen. And if you're really willing to work into meeting the other person's best interest, you'll find a solution.
But then, if we look, I hope that they don't mind me using them as an example. Our guest earlier, Miss Lynn, shared that they were married 52 years. Now, we're not going to get into whether there was, thank God, maybe they were all 52 years of bliss, but they probably were like anything. The company that's been around for 100 years will probably tell you there were times when they were teetering on a bankruptcy. They may tell you when there were times they were not sure that they would be able to even open the doors in those first days, not just because of the economy and the changing market. So in any relationship, for it to work, there has to be a consistent, concerted effort. Back to the personal relationships, vulnerability. Many of us are not willing to share because then we become, in our minds, well, this person knows this thing about me, so they'll be able to take advantage of it. They'll be able to manipulate. We don't want to be vulnerable. I mean, very few of us are willing to think of we watch wartime movies, cover the 6. We want to make sure that we protect ourselves.
Yeah, we don't do that because we want to prevent ourselves from pain or being taken advantage of. But the truth is, if you know what your needs are, you will not compromise it. Yeah, it might be hard to walk away from the relationship, but at the end of the day, you have to choose yourself.
But go back to those relationships. Whether it's the job, the person's been in the job for, usually the longer they're in a relationship, the perhaps less inclined they're willing to walk away, even though they're not happy.
Well, yeah, because they've been using different coping mechanisms to just that's okay, suck it in. One more week, let's do it. But then afterwards, it's like, okay, what is more important? To go and do my work and being miserable, or actually, starting to address the fear of doing something different and going for whatever's going on inside, even if I don't know. If you don't know yet, it's because you didn't get the chance even to sit with yourself to address that. Because you're scared. It's like, oh my God, it's change.
Fear of commitment.
not really commitment, but fear of change.
Fear of change.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you're being like in that like work relationship.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and as you said, I'm thinking of a number of things. First, I with a friend after what seems like 1,000 years working for the same company and certainly in the same sector, gets to a certain age and all of a sudden I was expected to retire, and does so. And one day I said, "Man, I admire your dedication. You must have loved this job." He said, "I hate it every day. I did it because I had to provide for 1,000 children and the wife and everybody else." I thought, and at that day, he found a new purpose. He pursued his passion. He saw his health return, the color to his skin. I mean, he looks like a young man again.
But you see, if you ask him, when he's about to have his last breath, what would you have done different? He would have probably go back and say, "You know what, I will have tuned into my passion before instead of going with what I'm told to be that I have to do."
I'll pretend it's just the two of us talking, right? Nobody else is listening. And a good friend asked me just recently, if you knew that you were going to draw your last breath, at this particular time, what would you do? All right? Before I answer, if it's okay, I'll ask you, but I'll also ask our listeners that question. They want to share their thought. Now they can. It's 949-8837, 1-800-534-8255. And I wonder what their response would be. Could I ask you, if you knew, to some extent,
I'm on my last day, and what will I have done different?
You've got a week to live, a month, a year. Would you fulfill your dreams and go to, what is it, the bucket list? Will you do this, that, or another? Do you know what you would do? You don't have to share it, but do you know what you would do?
Well, I think I will keep doing exactly what I'm doing because it really feels like I'm tuning into my life purpose.
Yeah. You found your calling, right? You found okay.
And if I had to die like in the next 5 minutes, what I will do differently is probably, if I could, tune into my negative emotions and my discomfort way earlier.
Okay, which is understandable. Without hesitation, I gave my answer. And in the time since, I've reflected on that question, and my answer has not changed, and probably, some would say sadly, will not change until So I asked other people, and realized that there's a term, or have a bucket list. For some, they want to go to a country they never visited, or they visited long ago and want to. For some, it's to do this. So they bring in joy to their lives because they want to see a particular sunset from a particular vista. They want to have a particular meal. All these things sound great. You know what my thing that I would do?
No.
And as I said it, and if those say, "Boy, that's pathetic," some would say, "Oh, that's admirable." You choose. I would make sure that my affairs are in order, that my family and friends have no worries about what needs to be done, so that their lives are easier. I wouldn't go and, with a good friend in his wonderful sailboat and enjoy the North Sound, or to sail to some part. I wouldn't bake that favorite chocolate cake. I won't sit and play, another game of checkers with my father. I would spend that time making sure that my life is in order, so that they are noble or pathetic. People can be the guess.
Oh, no, it's not that. It's like, why do you think this was not done?
This is it, right? And so here's the kicker. For many of us, we won't do our will. We won't do a funeral plan. We won't do certain things because consciously or unconsciously we think that there's a superstition that by so doing will bring about this demise much sooner. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the fear. But what we fear the most, we end up feeding, right? Because we push it away, but we're not aware it's growing more.
Yeah. And I think that we don't realize that we have more love to give, and we're more deserving of love. But yet we live by the arbitrary concept of time. Right? We assign even names to days, so that even in the religious discussions, the seventh day as the Sabbath isn't the Sabbath. It is a Saturday or a Sunday or a Wednesday, whatever we are assigned to it. That discussion leads to discord and division, as opposed to what it is, a spiritual revelation and a day of rest and a day of worship. Right? As we do with so much. I think back to other societies that we have now called primitive. They live by the sun. they worked and farmed by the moon, and they were in tune with themselves. And here we are in this arbitrary construct of lunch is at a certain time, 3 squares a day we save for our meals, and yet we fail to rest and to relax.
Everything is done to keep us away from our emotions and how we feel. This is why we are in a situation that we are now.
Okay.
We're out of touch with our emotions and feelings.
All right, we got a news break to take. If it's possible, share with us, how do we get in touch with those emotions and feelings? Or what is it that we do? And maybe you can invite us to contact you and see how we can be better.
Yeah.
And that's the word I use.
It's not be better. You already are it.
I see that. All right, we're going to pause and take that break. When we come back, more Talk Today.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman. Your voice, your choice.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. Official state funeral proceedings have begun in honor of Mr. Benson O. Ebanks, MBE, who passed away on Tuesday, March 29, 2022. Following the lying in state, a hearse carrying Mr. Ebanks will travel from the House of Parliament throughout West Bay, the district where he lived and served as an elected official, beginning at 2:30 p.m. The official funeral for Mr. Ebanks will take place this Friday, April 8th at 3 p.m. at the John Gray Memorial Church in West Bay. In international news, Russian troops were heard discussing killing civilians in the Ukrainian town of Bucha in messages intercepted by German intelligence, German media says. Some of the radio traffic tracked by the BND intelligence agency appears to match locations of bodies just outside Kiev. Ukraine says more than 300 civilians were killed by the Russians in Bucha. Moscow denies any involvement. After a COVID infection, there is an increased risk of developing a serious blood clot for the next 6 months, a study from Sweden suggests. The research found people with severe COVID and those infected during the first wave had the highest clot risk. Scientists have presented a stunningly preserved leg of a dinosaur. The limb, complete with skin, is just one of a series of findings emerging from the Tanis fossil site in the U.S. state of North Dakota. But it's not just their exquisite condition that's turning heads. It's what these ancient specimens purport to represent. The claim is the Tanis creatures were killed and entombed on the actual day a giant asteroid struck Earth, the day 66 million years ago when the reign of the dinosaurs ended and the rise of mammals began. These are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins.
For the latest in news and information,
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Welcome back, and I wish I was like my brothers who were gifted in languages. I could, as we speak to Miss Stephanie Dos Santos about relationships and this idea of commitment, I could have welcomed our guest back in another language other than say, yo, welcome back, thanks for talking, my best accent. But if I were to do it in French, as we say, hey, welcome back, thanks for joining us, how would that sound in French?
Attends, let me go back onto the French again. Oh la la, sometimes because languages are on two different frequencies.
Yes.
It's a shift, like I'm tuning into the English vibration and I have to switch back to French, and sometimes it's a challenge. Okay, ouais, bienvenue, bon retour. Et nous voici de retour à la radio avec Sterling et Stéphanie pour parler des relations.
Merci.
De rien.
Très bien, no? It is, and I ask you to do that because here we are in this wonderful place in the world where there's so many people from all walks of life, so many different nationalities and languages represented, so many cultures and food, and yet we don't see the value, not the economic value, the social value in being able to, without any effort, reach out to someone from somewhere. It's probably your co-worker, your neighbor, right? The classmate even, and embrace that. So, and as we were going to the break, I was asking about How do we? What was the question asking? How do we
tune into emotions?
Yeah. How do we do that? Because sometimes, well, how do we do that? Is it possible?
Well, it's about really connecting with how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because every feeling will come through a sensation.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to acknowledge that however you're feeling, if it's like distress or joy, it's telling a personal truth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So even if you're feeling angry, it's telling something that is truthful about whatever situation is going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you're feeling joy, it's the same. But the problem, right, is that when we don't feel good,
mm-hmm.
we want to dismiss that as quickly as possible in order for us to feel great right away.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how we put like coping, like your coping skills come into the picture. When what we should be doing, it's also acknowledging the truth of that.
Mm-hmm. Something that you have allowed me to reflect on. I always believe that words are powerful, and I reflected on that notion. And it's not just semantics and words that we would use ordinarily. I want to be better, I want to improve, sound like good words, because who doesn't want to be better? Who doesn't want to be improved? But you shared with us before. Could I ask you again in that almost has a, if we not careful, that means that if we want to be better, that means that we're not good now, right? So
yeah, you said to me, I want to improve.
Yes.
I remember when you say that.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't need to improve, because even when you say, I need to improve, it feels like unconsciously
mm-hmm.
the best you is far away.
Right.
You know, so it creates that distance and it put that perspective that now you're far from being good.
Mm-hmm.
When what we need to do is to realize that everything is already inside. So that's why I suggest to consider just removing the layers,
mm-hmm.
all those walls, whatever you want to call it, that are around your heart.
Mm-hmm. And yet we do that very consciously and deliberately in our language as parents to our children, as teachers to our students, even the supervisor doing the evaluation. Well, I want you to work on this area. I want you, and we do that, not understanding what may be unconsciously, and in some places a conscious manifestation of what that thing is now doing to that person that is hearing it.
Okay, I was talking about the emotional aspect,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that's true that if it applies for physical
Right.
activity, that's going to be,
Right.
It's more like I need to practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I need to keep practicing so I can get to where I want to.
Right. But the emotional part of it, I mean, you know, we put that pressure, that label on ourselves. So the emotion that we're feeling, some of us will feel, and I'll be guided by you, something has happened, it's upset us, we're angry, and yet I need to control my emotions. I need to not, we do that. Should we do that?
Should you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel good when you do it? Well, it's very likely because you got told that being angry, it's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
You should not be angry. And when you look at it, you don't get validated when you're angry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? So that's why we feel like we're not allowed to be angry.
All right. I don't know if anyone has seen this happen. I don't know if anyone has ever done it. All right. Well, share it with me. There's a meeting and something transpires and the person says, give me a second. And they go, step away from the room. They go into another room and they scream. And then they come back. And the faces on everybody is like, oh my God, right? Now, if we were to do that, chances are people are going to be looking at us differently, right? But that was a way to...
Well, yeah, I mean, if you needed to do that, I think it's probably better to go in the next room and scream than jumping on the table and just ripping the head off the person.
All right.
So you're not touching anyone when you actually do that. What you confronted yourself with is judgment for allowing yourself to say, you know what, I was angry and I needed to put that stuff out.
Okay. And I use it as an example to think of two situations. The police officer intervenes. Presumably there's some bit of legislation and convention and practice. Maybe it goes back to something called habeas corpus or whatever it is that lawyers talk about. So you're being arrested and the police officer is supposed to inform you of your rights, and if you say something, it's going to be held against you, right? I gather that somewhere in our legislation, the Constitution, that was somehow removed, that they're not required to tell you. That aside. But if you say this thing, it's going to be held against you. Then I go into the home environment, the husband and wife having a conversation, one thinking that this is a safe space, one can vent and share, only to discover the next day or 10 years later, 40 years later, that what you said can and will be and has been held against you. So where do we create that environment where that person has this safe space, know that it is, and can share?
Well, first, it's about choosing wisely and taking the time to choose your partner. So first you have to, you don't need to be perfect to go into a relationship. This is also like an avoidance strategy to wait to be perfect and waiting for the perfect person. So it's about taking the time to assess what is it that you want. Because what I want in a relationship might be different, will be different than what you want in a relationship, that what Miss Susan wants in a relationship. But from the moment that we have that in place, then we can, when we meet someone, take the time to get to know the person, noticing the red flags. I always say, just take the time. Watch how the person is treating children. Watch how the person is treating animals. Yep. And watch how the person is treating his enemies. Because there's no guarantee that one day you won't be on that category.
Don't tell us that you would have them do unto you, in a sense, right? All right. I know Ms. Susan and I talked about it, and what we want is good cooked food in a relationship, but that's a different story. But I go back to that dynamic, right, where we're sharing, and we are familiar that in some jurisdictions, from the legal perspective, I think maybe in the U.S. it might be more readily apparent to some because of the television and our own experiences, that you're under their constitution. If you don't wish to say anything, that's your right, you're okay. Not just about self-incrimination or like, but presumably in our jurisdiction, we have this concept of adverse inference, where if you don't say anything, therefore it's presumed that not that you're innocent, but that you're guilty, now therefore you have something to hide, and so they can infer that, oh, there's something there. When we see that in law, as we see it in our relationships, where the person now is maybe choosing not to share or not to share at that time, it isn't because they're being respectful and responsible, or they just need a little time to process and to properly assess, well, what would this thing do? If the societal expectations is this, if the lack of safety in this engagement in the home, or if it's in the law in terms of you before the courts and you refuse to say anything, that somehow that's going to be interpreted that you're a bad person, you've done something wrong, you have something to hide, so you therefore must be quote-unquote guilty. Interesting how one informs the other and the two are the same.
Yeah, I think it's important to separate, what is, the on the law aspect and what's happening into your home environment.
All right, this notion of self-awareness and self-development, I'll put it from the perspective of two things. In our careers, we are assessed. We have nice terms for it, but we're being assessed for promotion and for validation, for bonuses and pay and the like. And we all have a personal development plan. We have to do continuing education. And if we don't, then we're assessed in a way. Even the person who just sits there and clicks the button and really takes away little or nothing from the thing, but the exercise has been completed, probably assessed much better. So with that in mind, and then the person who sits in a relationship and decides, I need to be conscious and self-aware, I need to do these things. What is my love language? First, for some, they're hearing it, and then they're going to go now and search it and go, take a test, then assess themselves. And they come away and they find, what, I really like physical touch. I like quality time. I like when the person says nice things about me, or I like when the person does something for me, or what I really like, giving me some gifts, So as they learn that, and then they go to their partner or they whichever, because you can do it for yourself as well, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I see a signal. I know Miss Susan is not working for Cayman Airways, and she's not on the runway directing that flight from the BRAC to land. So we've got a final break to take. But maybe in the closing discussion as we recap, let's ask, as we become self-aware, Are there initial steps that we need to take to do that? And if so, what are they and how do we do it? Is that something that we could maybe figure out how we can navigate?
Yeah.
All right. See that? Stay tuned.
Busy, busy, busy. Feel like there's not just enough hours in the day. Savannah Pharmacy, service to make your life easier. Now you can WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. And pickup is just around the corner with everything your family needs and convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays. WhatsApp your prescription order to 929-5045. Savannah Pharmacy, wholesome values with modern conveniences.
From boat days to beach gatherings, leave the catering to Subway. Choose from small and large sandwich platters, double meat wrap platters, and top it off with optional cookie platters for dessert. Or ask about our Subway box to go with the option of 6-inch or foot-long sandwich, 1 cookie, and 1 bag of chips. For all occasions and celebrations, let Subway focus on the food so you can focus on the fun. Visit subway.ky for catering options. Subway. Eat fresh.
For medical lab services in Cayman, go straight to MedLab.
For a full range of medical services, pleasant, clean and comfortable environment, no long lines and affordable fees, visit MedLab at the Smith Road Plaza. Open Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and half day on Saturdays. Call 949-7331 to make your appointment.
For medical lab services in Cayman, MedLab.
Ask our professional team about the benefits of cutting-edge technology with MedLab's new state-of-the-art digital mammogram machine.
Raising children is costly. That is why each year the Ministry of Education provides, through its Early Childhood Assistance Program, funding to assist Caymanian children to attend an early childhood center. For early childhood funding assistance, call the Early Childhood Care and Education Unit at 244-3155 or 936-0267 or download an application form from the Ministry's website at www.gov.ky/education and email the completed form to ecap@gov.ky.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. And thanks so much for joining us. We value your feedback. So as I see you privately and publicly, continue to share. Grateful for our guests for coming on board and helping us to be better positioned in a sense. Let's do it better again. Ms. Stephanie Dos Santos is our guest. I was asking, just during the break and then prior to going into it, we tend to do things for people willingly. We want to do it. We know this thing is helpful to them, and yet sometimes they don't seem to value it, to appreciate it. They don't seem to understand the effort, even though the thing is absolutely beneficial to them. Many of us probably do that and come away, well, what do we do in that situation? What is that? What does that mean for us?
So there's two aspects actually on that one. So first, did your friend ask you to help?
So question that, okay.
Yeah. So because like sometimes people don't want to be helped. So it's also something that even if we know what could be helpful for them, we also have to respect that they might not want it. So we can hold that space for them and say, if you like, I could do that for you.
Okay.
If it helps, And if you did it, if you like, and the other circumstance, so you do it, and because they ask you and they're not being grateful for it, and it's hurting your feelings, well, it's your responsibility to share it as well. Like in a kind way, you hold your truth.
Okay.
So you're not being aggressive. You just say, well, actually, I did that in order to bring you more joy with what's going on at the moment. Also, I have to share with you that the way you react, the way you respond to it, made me feel like you didn't really value what I did. And it was a bit hurtful for me.
So be willing to communicate.
Yeah.
Okay.
But very often we will not do that. We just like, suck it in.
Yeah.
It's like, because if I say it, maybe we're going to go into a conflict. And this is something that it's not natural, right? And most people want to avoid conflict at all costs. when it's not because you're going to speak your truth that it means that you're going to go into a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tune back into your heart center and holding that truth to yourself and be comfortable with it, allowing those stressful emotions, to go until you can really verbalize what it is. And you share it with your friend.
And as you said, I reflect on the first part. Sometimes we superimpose ourselves into the lives of our partners, our children, our siblings, in our neighborhoods. Well, because we've had the experience, the expertise, we're an extra pair of hands, we can help. But we need to stop to ask, well, were we even asked for help?
Well, it goes back way back, when we think that we know better what's best for people. And this is also an aspect that is part of the socialization process.
Okay.
We grew up with the idea that other people know better what's best for us. And this is how, we talk about that a few times, last time, is that eventually we end up growing as adults that have lost trust to self, and we end up choosing based on what we think is expected us to choose.
I'm glad you share that, because for me, as I reflect, I see where when you're asked to help, this person is, and you find a way to navigate. Sometimes it's getting the person from point A to point B, it's an introduction, it's whichever. And you're told, well, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I understand the concept, as I think I do, but I struggle. Well, you've done all this thing, the person wants it, and then you brought the horse to the water only to let it look at its reflection and then die of thirst. Surely, you got the horse to the water, you can't make it drink. Otherwise, the consequence is dire.
Well, that's interesting, because you know what, as you're speaking of that, I got this example with my history teacher that called me, and he's like, I had a problem with that student last week, and he's like, I've been really rough with him. I'm like, okay, tell me about it. And he's like, well, if he's being stuck, and he's like, it's really annoying me, and I was so rough with him, I need to have a conversation with the kid. And then I looked at him and I said, Philip, what is it that you're finding yourself stuck at the moment? What are you stuck on at the moment? And he just stepped back. He's like, well, that's interesting. I'm like, well, if you're having a reaction to that kid because you see that he's being stuck in a situation, it's because you can clearly see it in him, but if you're being triggered, it's because it's reflecting an aspect of you.
Projected?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we went through the talking together, and he realized that, yes, he was keeping himself stuck based on his divorce.
Okay. And as I listen to that, I think sometimes that we don't understand how the relationships and the dynamics interplay. We may understand the power position, but we don't appreciate that the greatest exercise of power is restraint. Is it then that as we look at where we are and who we are, we're unwilling to look inward and appreciate, like the love languages, and become self-aware? What is it about us? For some, they need to go to a quiet space to hear the surf, to taste the salt air. For some, they need to be physically engaged in a very contact sport, as it were, to get that sense of purpose. But to the person who's listening and who say, well, if I consciously did that, everybody around me is going to come away with a less than positive impression of the person doing it. If that happens, what do we do? How do we make sure that the person listening now says, listen, this is about you, and making sure that your health and well-being is paramount?
Well, if you feel like you need to go to near the water, you need to go to the beach, because this is how you find your inner peace and you can let go of some stress and everything. I mean, yeah, you might not want to take your break, at 9:30 or 10 a.m. to go to the beach and do that. But you manage it. You can go on your lunch break or after work. You make sure that you give yourself that very thing that you need in order to feel emotionally balanced. But it happened very often to hear people to say, "Oh, I love to go to the beach. It's really my happy place." And I ask, "Okay, how long has it been?" "It's been 2 weeks. I didn't have the time."
Yeah. But that's it.
It's like you don't have. You put your energy into something else. You didn't prioritize yourself.
You do.
And this is what we think. We think that other people's needs and desires, like it's more important than ours. That if we hold our space and say, okay, I need to go to the beach after work, so therefore I will not be able to have the dinner ready at 6 or whatever. I mean, it's not going to make us...
But isn't it then that in doing that, I keep hearing the word that some of us might hear, but if I did that, I would be judged as being selfish. Right? I need a 5, and we have the terms for it. I need a minute, I need a moment, I need a personal. And if you do that, you're going to, in your mind, and you probably sadly have been in the past or know others who have judged in a negative way. I can see it right now. The person who tomorrow calls in and say, "You know what? I'm taking a mental health day." That applies in some contracts. But there's probably going to be a notation, or a notation is going to be made that this person is, overwhelmed, stressed, and incapable of coping, and that may affect them later on.
I've heard that, and it's a reality. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've heard people being scared of doing that for that very precise reason. Well, we need to all be aware that we all the same. We all have those days. Some people are just better at coping than others. It does not make them mentally, emotionally healthier. It's a facade.
Yeah, I worked with someone once, and it was the greatest thing. We're in the middle of a project, and there were 2 things that had to happen for this person over time. If they didn't do their prayer and meditation early on, you see the impact on the day. For some people, it's that 5th cup of coffee before they're functioning. If you ask them if they're awake, they say, "No, not until I have my coffee." And for some, it's that run, it's that physical sprint, that 1 mile or 10 miles. They needed to get that in order to be able to cope. Right? Now, you take it away, they are, I don't want to say dysfunctional, but they're not there in their space.
Yeah, but this is probably exactly the space they should be finding themselves into in order to address, in the first place, what did they have to cope for? I don't know, my English is... Yeah. What is the thing that you think you have to cope?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And this is where discussions with you help to inform, instruct, but also helps us to reflect on the importance of being self-aware, of making sure that we take care of ourselves. Sadly, it probably has become repeated so often that we no longer see its value. The example of, if you're in an airplane, put on your oxygen mask first before you assist anybody else. I don't subscribe to that necessarily, but what's your take?
Like on the oxygen mask? In the plane?
Yeah.
I was a flight attendant, so I can tell you about that. Well, you're absolutely useless if you don't have oxygen in helping others.
There you go.
No, but the thing is, it's important to say that very often when we find that in a conflict, we can see that one aspect wants to and the other aspect does not want to. And one aspect will acknowledge that the other one we're going to judge it as not good. And instead of seeing the value and the truth that aspect holds, we will want to push it away and to override that with positivity and so on. So we have to come at peace with everything that comes with a challenge.
It's always wonderful chatting with you. I leave with a space where that, hopefully we'll be encouraged and incentivized to put into practice what helps us to hold our space, own our truth. And in our closing discussion, what would you want to either repeat or remind our listeners? What do you want to share with us as we listen?
Very quickly. Well, you do not have to cope. Happiness is real. Genuine happiness is real. And it's you don't have to become something else. It's only about undoing those layers of conditionings that were put around your beautiful heart.
embrace yourself. But Miss Stephanie, always a pleasure. Hopefully we'll get to engage with you again some more. And hopefully as people listening would appreciate that, like the passenger on the airplane, if they don't put on their mask to get the oxygen, there'll be a little value. If someone listening wanted to reach out to you to avail themselves of your expertise, how could they?
You could go on Facebook or Instagram on DNA Introspection page, or on WhatsApp 329-8674.
Thanks very much. This is where I think there's a resource in this country that if we are willing to seek and acknowledge and embrace, we'll find ourselves in a space that brings greater joy, contentment, fulfillment in our own lives.
Absolument.
All right. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. All right, to Miss Susan, from the Brack to the Bay, from what's that country song? Play the Ace and won a Queen. Well, there's a song that we're going to ask Miss Susan at some point, so you got to stay tuned to Radio Cayman. She's going to play it right after. She might. What's the young lady's name? Demi Lovato. She talk about How I Love You or something like that. She'll find the song and she'll play it between now and 3 p.m. She may be right after. If she does, she'll tell me. And as she seeks and searches, we'll see. Something like How I Love You or something. It was a song that was asked of me to play, and it's we'll find it. But why I ask her to do that is for us to appreciate that in life, to really have a genuine fulfillment, we have to exhibit and, by example, love. That agape love, love that we have for ourselves so that we can have love for others. And as we share, encourage, inspire, and nurture, we'll appreciate that together. We make a healthier, safer, much more stable and socially harmonious society. There are many today who are reflecting on the loss of loved ones with great fondness, but even in there's much sadness. So let that legacy be one that inspires us to greater things as we instruct and empower each other. Tomorrow, my good friend Shane Nobi Edwards will sit with us. He'll make the trek from the east, sit in our studio, God's willing, and we'll talk not just about the environment, but we love it. So, over to Susan for the song of the day. Stay tuned for more talk today, right after the midday news tomorrow, but join Mr. Art first thing in the morning for the best political engaged discussion. If you're listening to other talk shows, then you're missing the best that we have to offer. Until then, be blessed.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. MedLab in Smith Road Plaza, your complete medical laboratory solution. Call 949-7331. And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village, convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays.